The authorities are going after health protocol violators. The Interior and Justice Departments have drafted guidelines on the arrest, detention, and probe of those who do not follow minimum health standards. We now go above and beyond the headlines with Justice Undersecretary Adrian Sugay. Good evening, sir. Welcome to Newsnight.
Hi, good evening, Pia. Good evening to your televiewers.
Yes, sir. Well, can we go through those guidelines that you've drafted already for the arrest, detention, and probe of those who violate minimum health standards? Very quickly, sir.
Yes. Well, basically, what we did was, we in coordination with the Department of Interior and Local Government, as well as with the Philippine National Police, we prepared a set of guidelines, or we call it a joint memorandum circular, which just really practically reiterates what is provided for in other laws already, or in other directives on the part of the president and the IATF COVID-19, or for the management of COVID-19. So this is just really a reiteration. It just reminds the Department of Justice, the Department of Interior and Local Government, the PNP, with regard to the manner by which minimum health protocols or minimum health standards should be enforced, and what to do in the event that there are violators.
Well, sir, can you briefly go through them one by one? Tell us what we need to know.
Okay. So basically, some of the salient points are the following: the local government units are mandated or are reminded to adopt and implement all directives made by the president, and those which are prescribed under the omnibus guidelines on the implementation of community quarantine in the Philippines. And also, they are reminded to ensure compliance with local ordinances which they themselves enacted. And they were also reminded, local government units are reminded to designate appropriate places that will serve as holding areas for persons cited for violation of health and safety ordinances. And such holding areas should be used for initial investigation and booking purposes. The PNP shall guarantee that the arrest of any persons for violation shall be anchored on local ordinance and other laws, and that in case of warrantless arrest or violation, that there is on the part of the DOJ an immediate inquest or preliminary investigation, and that the prosecution offices shall ensure the immediate release of all approved resolutions or informations for purposes of these violations of the minimum health standards.
So you Sec Sugay, what you're saying really is that, like you said earlier, this is just a reiteration of what we already know. It's almost like a reminder. It's interesting also because the president was saying that he's going to look for a suitable law as basis to arrest those who gather, for example, in large groups. Now, you yourself had said that you're reiterating what is already in the law. So apart from local ordinances, what specific Republic Acts are we referring to here?
Yes. Well, first of all, of course, Pia, when we talk about violations of minimum health standards or any sort of law which is supposed to implement minimum health standards, we really need to refer to a particular law. It has to be anchored or based on a particular law. And I guess this is the president, being a lawyer himself and a former prosecutor, had this in mind when he was saying that there must be some law which punishes or penalizes violators. So what we found actually is that in general, most of these laws actually relate to local ordinances or ordinances which have already been enacted by most of the local government units. So, we're talking about laws with regard to, the proper wearing of masks, laws with regard to social distancing, things like that. So we already have laws in place. And if there are any other violations, for instance, when you talk about barangay officials who refuse to implement local ordinances or the directives of the president or the IATF, there are laws which penalize this dereliction of duty on the part of our local government officials. That's under the local government code, even under the revised penal code. There are actually laws, Pia.
Mhm. Okay, so in other words, you are standing on solid ground. Well, but of course, apart from that, above and beyond that, and like the president was saying, it's almost criminal to pass on the infection in a very irresponsible way. And what we see here is that that's because this is a public health emergency, and that's why we don't want to put ourselves in even more danger. Correct, sir? And that is why there is a reiteration of all these local ordinances. Like you said, if the barangay chairman, the barangay captains themselves don't implement these local ordinances, then we do have a problem.
Yes. Well, basically, because it was also found, I guess these guidelines were an offshoot. It's an offshoot of an earlier pronouncement of the president a couple of weeks ago, about 2 weeks ago, with regard to the failure on the part of our local government officials, not just the barangay captains, even mayors. I understand, to implement minimum health standards. So this is really what it is. So it's just maybe a reminder of on the part of the local government officials, to comply with the law, and also it's also for purposes, I guess, of ensuring that there is no confusion in the implementation of the law, and also to ensure that even where there are violations already, that say all the safety protocols are in place. Like when you talk about holding areas, when you talk about detention areas, when you talk about the actual undertaking of inquest or preliminary investigation. So these things we put in this joint memorandum circular and these guidelines, just to really remind everybody that there are laws in place, there are ordinances in place, and that they should be complied with, and should be strictly implemented.
And USEC, there is, of course, a very strong focus on the LGUs, like you said, the mayors, and especially the barangay chairman, because these are the ones who have their ears to the ground. These are the ones who can actually see what's going on in their own barangay, or at least we expect them to, because that's their job, right? Kaya ganun talaga yung sinasabi ni Presidente, no, when he talks about how important it is for the barangay chairman to be on top of the situation.
Yeah, that is correct, Pia. That is correct. So really, there is the directive is issued against local government officials, and also against the Philippine National Police. But according to the Philippine National Police, in fact, and actually, according to the Department of Interior and Local Government, they would also really want to involve the barangays, and our barangay officials in the implementation of these minimum health standards, because really, it's they're the ones on the ground. And they're the ones who are really there, in our barangays, in our residential areas, who are there. They're the ones who are there and will be in the best position to help implement these guidelines.
Mhm. Kanina po, Yusek Sugay, may sinabi po si Chief PNP General Guillermo Eleazar. No? He was saying this is an appeal to the sense of maturity of people. Pero sabi nga niya, meron pa rin mga matitigas ang ulo, pero 5% lang naman daw yon. Ang problema, sabi niya, ang 5% ng populasyon ng Pilipinas, 5 milyon din. So we do have a problem kapag merong hindi sumunod. Pero Yusek, one last na lang po. Halimbawa may resisting arrest, no? Parang dagdag kasalanan, kumbaga.
Oo, definitely. No, when you talk about, yung resisting arrest, may matitigas ang ulo, no. Kasi normally, Pia, no, yung local government, these local government ordinances, normally first offense would be a fine of so much, and if you just pay the fine, that's it. No case is filed against you, no. Just pay the fine with the local city treasurer. But there are times when really there are people who just refuse to comply and end up even quarreling or arguing with our law enforcement agents, even our barangay officials. So under these circumstances, well, I guess the applicable provisions of the revised penal code will have to be used, and to ensure that these people are hailed to court for refusing to obey lawful directives or lawful orders of the government through our law enforcement agencies.
Justice Undersecretary Adrian Sugay, sir, thank you very much for joining us this evening.